Step out of the matrix with me. Like, share, and subscribe. In recent years, transgenderism has become a prominent thing in the public consciousness. Stated briefly, transgenderism is the proposition that gender is a social construct, which is a set of behaviors and expectations imposed by culture on either men or women. I want to look at three statements that sort of define transgenderism and the philosophy and how it operates. And then I want to sort of break that down and form a conclusion as to what transgenderism really is. The first phrase is male and female assigned at birth. They'll talk about somebody and say, well, they were misgendered when they were born. They were called male, and really later on they discovered they were female. They were called female and later on discovered that they were male. Well, the issue here is that if transgender is a philosophy that says male and female are not attached to a particular gender, which is a social construct, then no baby at birth is misgendered. Gender is something that gets assigned to you by society, but whether or not you're male or female is a genetic trait that's present. It's not something we can change or that society imposes on you. It'd be like if you're born with brown eyes and the person is misidentified because later on they feel like they'd rather have blue eyes. Well, that could be true. But that doesn't change the fact that their eyes are actually brown and that is something that was noted and observed. It wasn't something that was assigned. The other phrase is trans man or trans woman. That's the other term that's used a lot. So this is the huge contradiction here for me, is that if you call somebody a trans man or a trans woman, you're actually acknowledging that they were born a man or a woman. So what you objected to when they were a baby, somehow it's all right for me to acknowledge that this is a trans man, somebody who's a woman, who's now wants to be born a woman, is now wanting to be called a man. So they acknowledge here that the sex is something innate. They're either male or female. It is an innate thing that you can identify. It's really not a mysterious thing. And the third thing is the term transitioning. So in transgender philosophy, somebody born a man or a woman, although they don't want to identify you as a man or woman when you're born, but somehow later on in life, it's all right for us to do this according to the philosophy. So if somebody's born a man, they want to transition into being a woman. Well, if gender is a social construct, there's really no transitioning to do, which is something that's always baffled me. The main conundrum and contradiction is this. Transgender philosophy will sometimes talk about gender as if it's male or female sex. And the other times it talks about male and female sex as if it's gender. And it never reconciles anyone clearly, either one of them in a well-defined way that can be logically followed. Is that if it's just a social construct and you don't need hormones and you don't need cosmetic surgery to make you look a certain way, you just embrace whatever roles you want. And you've transitioned at that point. If you reject whatever gender norms are in a society and you decide you're not going to embrace them, then you have transitioned. Because looking like a man and looking like a woman changes nothing about who you are as an individual. And if being born a man didn't connect you with a gender, then surely cosmetically altering your appearance to look like a man or woman has absolutely no bearing on what your gender identity would be or who you see yourself as. And so that's really the M. Night Shyamalan twist that you discover when you study transgender philosophy, is that far from being a philosophy that wants to detach people from gender and say it's not attached to being a man or attached to being a woman, it's a very repressive attitude towards gender. It says that unless you conform to gender as society projects it, then you have to actually change and become that sex and fit into that gender. It's one of the most shocking things ever to realize that. This is like gender norming to the max. This is like Archie Bunker thinking that, girls were girls and men were men, and there's nothing in between. So if a woman happens to enjoy NFL football and to go hunting and fishing, then suddenly her gender is different, right? A woman can't do that. She's really a man. She's a trans man now. But of course, that isn't true. What's true is that our sex is something that's already determined. And if gender is a set of expectations, then it's not attached to gender. They're correct on saying that. But then they insist that you can't be that. They have this very binary thinking about what gender is, to the point they can't accept themselves as just individuals. They have an obsession with placing themselves within that binary gender role. And that is the crazy thing about it. Transgenderism, far from being a philosophy that releases us from gender norms, is a philosophy that's obsessed with gender norms and insists to the point of doing hormone therapy and cosmetic surgery and altering ourselves to look like the one sex they are. They go to that extent to make us fit into gender norms, and they're not trying to actually release us from them.